Hey guys, so today I want to talk about a new guitar amp that I got. So this is a Supro Keeley Custom 12. So it's made by the company Supro, which have actually historically been developing amplifiers since the 1930s. They go way back. They're a very old American company that's been making guitar amps for a long time, 30s to 60s I believe, and then from the late 60s they were basically defunct because their parent brand Valco shut down. But then recently, I think about 10 years ago, around 2013, it got revived, and now they're making amplifiers again, and also guitars and FX pedals. I've actually reviewed one of their guitars as well, the Supro Hampton. So I think that in general, Supro stuff is kind of underrated. It kind of like flies under the radar. Not a lot of people, I mean, they are getting popular in some circles, but in general, people still know about Marshall, Fender, and Vox. Those are the three main guitar amp manufacturers everyone knows about. Those are the historically significant guitar amplifiers, right? All made by Marshall, Fender, and Vox. But Supro, I think, has its place in the guitar, I say, history as well. They inspired a lot of rock and roll records, like Jimmy Page famously played through a Supro for Led Zeppelin 1. So they actually are a piece of rock history as well. And they make a lot of amplifiers that go back to their heyday in the 50s and 60s. But this amplifier is a special one. It's not actually based on those old designs. This one is done in collaboration with a boutique pedal maker called Robert Keeley. So Robert Keeley, he's basically like one of the pioneers of the boutique guitar pedal industry. By boutique pedals, I mean like small operation guitar pedals. So not Boss, not Ibanez, not Fender, yeah, not those bigger guitar companies, right? Electro Harmonics, MXR, Dunlop, not those bigger ones. Boutique pedal makers, usually like small operations. And Keeley Electronics, started by Robert Keeley, was one of the first kind of like boutique builders that really like kind of made pedals more accessible for people, not just stick to a small group. And I guess you can count, you know, Mike Fuller from Full Tone, or Analog Man, or George Trips from Way Huge, or maybe Bill Finnegan from who made the Klon Centaur. Like all these guys kind of like pioneered the boutique pedal industry in the 90s. And Robert Keeley more in the early 2000s, I think, is when he kind of became popular. So yeah, not to mention the fact that Robert Keeley makes amazing pedals. Like I've used several of his pedals before. I've used the Oxblood Germanium, the Magnetic Echo, the Omni Reverb. Like a lot of his pedals, like Super Fat Mod, like they're amazing pedals. So another thing is like his pedals aren't really that expensive compared to other like boutique builders. Like they're usually around $150 to $200. I mean, $200 is pretty much the standard nowadays for boutique pedals. So yeah, the fact that he makes some of his pedals for cheaper, I'd say like, yeah, some of my favorite boutique builders are probably Keeley and Wampler. I think these two make like some of my favorite pedals I've used in the past before. So yeah, I just love his work, and definitely I'm excited to hear how he voiced this amp to work with different pedals. I might use a Keeley pedal later on in this video, but for now I'm just, or maybe in a future video, but for now I'm just going to use some of my most used pedals and yeah, see how well it works with those. Yeah, he designed this amp in collaboration with Supro to kind of take guitar pedals really well. So I was looking for a guitar amp that took pedals really well. We call these pedal platform amps. Basically, they're clean amps, very clean amps that have a lot of headroom so that we can actually get our overdrive sounds from our guitar pedals. So the thing about most guitar amps is that they have a clean channel usually and a drive channel. And a drive channel is usually what's used to get the overdrive distortion tone, or some of the older amplifiers just have a one channel, but you kind of push it to its limit. For me, like with a lot of modern guitarists, we prefer to get our overdrives from pedals because I just love overdrive pedals. I think I've done videos on so many different overdrive pedals on my channel. I just love all the different flavors and kinds of overdrive pedals, so I want to have a good clean guitar amp with lots of headroom in order to get that overdriven sound from my pedals. So this is more designed as a pedal platform amp that's very clean and neutral and has a decent amount of headroom. So I'm going to compare this one to the Milkman One Watt Plus, which is the guitar amp I currently have, which is also a nice, decent, clean pedal platform amp. So I'm not saying that this guitar amp can't be a good one for pedals. That's why I've been using this one for so long, because it's been pretty good so far for for pedals, it's just like I wanted something more, something with even more headroom. So yeah, the Milkman One Watt Plus, this is a boutique amp. It's a hand-wired amp done by one guy, Tim Marcus from San Francisco. So I got this back in 2017 when I was living in San Francisco. So I was actually able to meet the builder of this amp, which is pretty cool. How often do you meet the guitar builders of the things that you own, right? So it's pretty cool. I got this from Tim Marcus from San Francisco. He made these by hand, and they're very expensive. I think originally in 2017 he was selling these for $1,700 each, and this is like a 10-watt amp, 10-watt Class A all-tube amp. He was selling these for about $1,700. Now they're going for like $2,000, the same model. So this is the 1 Watt Plus. That actually is the name is a bit of a misnomer because it actually has 10 watts on tap. And the Supro Keeley model retails for about $1,200. So this is actually significantly cheaper than the Milkman. Not like super cheap or anything like that. It's not like a very budget amp or anything, but it's definitely cheaper than a boutique amp like the Milkman. So I'm going to go over the functionality of these two amps. So first of all, maybe I'll introduce the Milkman One Watt Plus first. I've had this since 2017. Again, not saying that this amp is bad or anything. Like, there's nothing really wrong with this amp. It's a nice amp, and it's decent for cleans. Just wanted something with even more headroom. So yeah, 10 watts, Class A. What it has is pretty simple controls. So it has two inputs here. Both of these are kind of the clean channel. It's just like one is for rhythm, I guess one is for lead, but they're both kind of clean. There's no really much difference there. Alright, so first I guess I'll go over the Milkman 1 Watt Plus. So this is the guitar amp I've had since 2017, and again, I'm not saying there's anything bad or wrong with this amp. It's pretty decent for pedals. It's just that I wanted something with even more headroom. So yeah, this model, pretty simple controls and everything. It has two inputs. Both of them are kind of clean. I'm actually not too sure why it has two inputs, because they're both kind of clean inputs. But it's cool when I have a friend over and I guess we can jam through the same amp. This one is just a normal volume control right here, a treble and a bass, and no mid. Yeah, just 2-band EQ here and a power adjustment, which I guess this is an attenuator, so it actually adjusts the power down, I think, to around 0.1 watts or something like that, all the way up to the full 10 watts. So this is really nice because, I'm usually in an apartment and I don't want to play too loud. So you can use this power attenuator to adjust the amount of actual power on tap here. It's a little bit different than a master volume. I'm kind of getting confused because, master volume, I was like, okay, what's the actual difference? A little bit different because this, I think, actually adjusts the amount of maximum output power. So you can actually overdrive easier with this amp. That's not necessarily something that master volume can do. So yeah, the look of this amp is inspired by I would say the blonde type of Fender amps. So the blonde Fender amps are around like early 60s, I would say, like right after the tweed era there was a blonde era. So I guess the sound of this amp and the look of this amp is kind of inspired by that. So tweeds are known for like kind of breaking up fairly soon, and that's kind of what my Swart Atomic Junior would be. My Swart Atomic Junior is basically an all tweed type of design and look. The Milkman One Watt Plus, yeah, this is like more of a blonde, Fender blonde style. Whereas the Keeley is actually more of a blackface, silver space style. So they're all like kind of based on different Fender circuits, but different eras, okay? Okay, and then I'm gonna look at the back here, and I've actually changed out the speaker on this amp. So this was shipped with a Celestion Alnico Blue. And the Celestion Alnico Blue was very loud and is very mid-rangey. It's a good speaker. It's a legendary speaker for a reason. I mean, the Alnico Blue was used on the Vox AC30s, right? Very legendary guitar amp. But for me, I wanted a different type of sound. I didn't want something that mid-rangey. So I changed it to a Jensen P12Q here. So the P12Q is, it has less volume. It doesn't go as loud as the Celestion Alnico Blue, but it's more cleaner. So I wanted something that has, that will, break up not as easily. Because the Celestion Alnico Blue, the thing is, yeah, that one, it's a very rock tone because it will actually break up fairly soon. So I switched to a Jensen P12Q to get more headroom, essentially, a more cleaner sound out of it. So yeah, already, you know, you guys can tell I want to have a very clean amp for my pedals. So yeah, 10 watt class A, there's a fuse right here. And then you have a standby switch in the middle. So this is the little power switch here. So you can have on, this is off position, they can put it in standby, and then so the tubes have warmed up, then you turn it on. So that's basically what that 3-position switch is, pretty simple. There's different plugs here. This is for, so this you have an 8 ohm speaker extension and then an 8 ohm for the main speaker. So make sure you plug into a speaker that's 8 ohms, of course, which most guitar speakers I would say are. So this one is hooked up to the 8 ohm main, but you can also hook it up to an extension as well. And yeah, it's made in San Francisco, California. It was cool to support a local guitar builder or guitar amp builder from the own city, my own city I was living in at the time. So it's cool just to get something from someone who's hand building these in San Francisco. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this amp. I'm going to demo this amp first, and then we'll talk about the Supro Keeley after that. So yeah, it's been a while since I demoed this amp. 2017 is when I got it. That was the last time I demoed it. I'll be using some pedals with it just to show off how good it is as a pedal platform, which like I said is pretty decent. Okay, so I have the Tubesteader Lightkeeper. This is a tube-driven kind of light overdrive boost guitar pedal. And then I have that going into this is a G-Town Holy Grail. This is kind of like a tube screamer-ish circuit, but I can dial back down the mids, and then I can get it to sound like, this is kind of like a Dumble ODS in a box, I guess, which is actually very tube screamer-ish to my ears. So I can kind of dial in that tube screamer sound, or I can actually roll down the mids. It's a very flexible pedal. Then I have the Fender Marine Layer Reverb, which actually this is one of the things I wanted to demo for this comparison too, because the Keeley, the Supro Keeley Custom 12 has an effects loop. The Milkman does not have an effects loop. So I have to put this on the front of the amp when it comes to the Milkman, which is like reverb. And then I have this connected to a Boss looper, which is what I use for yeah, most of my noodling or playing or jams. I just use this one for a lot. Yeah, I went through the Boss RC2, Boss RC3, and Boss RC5. But basically I've always used Boss loopers for my jams. So, right, that's what I'll be using. Then for my guitar, a choice of 2 right here. So usually use the Fender Stratocaster for the single coil tones. And I think if I'm going to be demoing guitar pedals and stuff, I'm going to be using the lower output single coil pickups from the Stratocaster. But I'll try the humbucker as well from my Gresh later on. But I thought first I might demo the single coil tones from my Stratocaster first. Okay. Alright, so plug it in. Alright, so I'm going to turn on, this is going to be the tone from my Milkman 1 Watt Plus, which is a more expensive guitar amp than this. Also another thing about the Milkman, why I liked it, why I still like it today, and why I got it, is because it's light. So the Milkman One Watt Plus, it's a 12-inch speaker inside of here, like I said, Celestial Nautica Blue, and then the Jensen, they're both 12-inch speakers. They actually both have 12-inch speakers, the Supro and the Milkman, but the Milkman weighs a lot less. This is only 24 pounds, whereas the Supro is like 42 pounds. So this is like considerably less, it's fairly light for a guitar amp like of this size, so that's another reason why I got this amp. Not just that the builder's in San Francisco, but the amp is pretty nice sounding, and it weighs like not that much, right? For a guitar amp this size, I'm coming from my store Atomic Junior. I wanted to have a really light guitar amp as well, right? So it's easier to move around and stuff. So yeah, this guitar amp being only 24 pounds is fairly light for what it is. So yeah, that's another reason why I got this amp. Very light and therefore easy to carry. Okay, another thing I really like about the Milkman One Watt Plus is that it's pretty light for what it is. I mean, it has a 12-inch speaker inside, right? I mean, the Celestial Nautica Blue and the Jensen P12Q are both 12-inch speakers, as is the Keeley Custom 12, which also houses a 12-inch speaker. So they both have 12-inch speakers, but the Milkman is substantially lighter. It's about 24 pounds, and the Keeley Custom 12 is about 42 pounds. So yeah, the Milkman One Watt Plus, a lot lighter, easier to carry, more transportable. That's one of the reasons why I picked this amp back in 2017. One of the reasons why I got it. Not just because it's made by somebody in San Francisco, but because it's very lightweight as well. And also sounds pretty good, right? It's got a decent clean tone. And pretty good for pedals, and that's the reason why I got it. Coming from my Sword Atomic Jr., I wanted to get an amp that was also had more headroom, but it was also lighter. Well, light for its size, I should say. Yeah, it's not lighter than the Sword Atomic Jr. The Sword Atomic Jr. is very light. That's an 8-inch speaker though. This is a 12-inch speaker, so yeah, only weighs 24 pounds, very light, easy to carry. So that's the reason why I got this originally. And yeah, that's I mean, there's a lot of features that this amp has that even the Supro Keeley Custom 12 doesn't, so this is not an upgrade actually. It's just not an upgrade in every sense of the term, I should say. It's an upgrade in terms of the headroom in the power, because this is a 25 watt amp. The Supro Keeley Custom 12 is a 25 watt amp. The Milkman One Watt Plus is a 10 watt amp. I wanted to get more clean headroom, so I upgraded to the Keeley Custom 12, but there's a lot of things that the Milkman One Watt Plus does better. It's more lighter, more transportable, and it has this power attenuator that the Keeley Custom 12 doesn't have. So yeah, it's not an upgrade in every way. I just want to make that clear. I upgraded to this amp, and I use upgrade in quotes because I wanted to get more headroom and more power. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an upgrade in every way, because it's not. There's a lot of features that the One Watt Plus has that the Keeley Custom 12 does not. Hence why I guess part of the reason why the Milkman One Watt Plus, besides being hand-built by a guy in the US, is more expensive. Okay, so we're going to play some things. Turn this guitar amplifier on, and you guys can hear, so all the dials have been set to 6, volume set to 6, treble set to 6, bass set to 6, and I'm going to put the power around the 6 position as well. So yeah, so there's a decent amount of headroom here. So you guys can hear with the clean sound. I'm not using any pedals right now. It's just the clean sound of my Fender Stratocaster. Again, single coil pickups going into the Milkman. So the Milkman One Watt Plus, this is what it sounds like without any effects. Just the Fender Stratocaster. Again, pretty good clean tones. Again, inspired by the Fender blonde amplifiers of the early 60s. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the tubes inside of this one. So the preamp tube is 12AX7, right, as you would expect. But it's got two 6v6 tubes working in parallel to make it a Class A amp. Then it's got the pretty good mercury magnetics transformer, stripper capacitors, high quality components, and it has a GC34 rectifier tube, I believe, as well. So yeah, it's a full tube Class A amplifier, and that's what you're hearing, 6v6. I'll talk about the Keeley after, but yeah, the configuration is not too different actually between the two. But yeah, this one does have a tube rectifier, which gives it more of a saggy compression. And that's actually what my Sword Atomic Jr. also had. And because it's 6v6, right, obviously you can tell there's a Fender type of cleans are in here. Alright, so how well does this do as a pedal platform? Because we know the clean tones are there, pretty good clean tones, right? Yeah, so let's, I'm going to turn on my booster. This is my, essentially a light gain boost, so you guys can hear it. So this is without, and then once I turn on my Lightkeeper, it gets a little bit louder. It's pretty transparent, so it doesn't change the tone too much. But it does add a little bit more high end, so I can hear, you guys can hear that. And then if I turn on the Lightkeeper, it's a little bit more high end. Right. So I always, this is like my always on pedal. I always leave it on when I'm playing. So I'm in the neck middle position right now, which is where I tend to live in when it comes to strats. So this is a Fender Marine Layer reverb. I'm going to add a reverb. I'm going to have it set to variation 1 for the room reverb. And it's just a medium amount of reverb there. So I don't know about you guys, but for me, I don't hear like this effect being that pronounced. And maybe that's because, because I'm just putting it through the front of the amp. I think compared to putting it in an effects loop, if you put it in an effects loop, it actually is a more pronounced effect. But since I have it going through the front of the amp on the Milkman, since it has no effects loop, I only hear a little bit of the reverb effect. Not actually as much as I would think. Like I even have all the controls set to middle here, but the reverb effect is very subtle. I only hear a little bit. It's a very subtle effect here in this configuration. Through this amp, I mean. If I turn on the mids on the Lightkeeper, you guys can hear how loud it gets. Then I turn on the Holy Grail, and you guys can hear a pretty massive boost because this is actually a very high gain overdrive. Turn this on. Okay. You guys can hear a very high gain distortion now. Actually, it's not even as loud as you would think because I changed out the speaker. So the original speaker, the Celestia Nautical Blue, was actually basically like twice as loud as this. The Jensen P12Q is a very polite speaker. It's like really meant for cleans. Definitely, if I was going to play with more, overdriven, distorted tones, the Alnico Blue would probably be better. But the Jensen is just more for cleans. That's why the even when I turn on the overdrive here, it doesn't sound as loud as it could, I guess. It's like sounding still pretty kind of polite. Not that gnarly as you would think. So yeah, again, I'm not saying that the Milkman One Watt Plus is a bad amp for pedals. It's pretty good for pedals, but you guys think, I just when I'm going to compare these two, you guys will find out that the Supro has a lot more headroom still. Now I'm going to turn on the looper here. So this is actually a loop that I play fairly often, and I can improvise on it fairly easily. So just to show you guys, basically a loop that I can use all these effects on, and it's one I played fairly often. So let's check it out with this one. So I can just play on this actually switch quickly to my Gresh Electromatic Center Block Junior so you guys can hear the effect of humbuckers. How humbuckers work with the Milkman. So, there. So yeah, it works pretty well with these Gresh Filtertron type humbuckers. That's with the reverb and the always on Lightkeeper here. Turn on the Lightkeeper just this. Actually, it's darker than a single coil. That's why I always have to turn on the Lightkeeper, otherwise it's too dark for me. It's too muddy-ish. Both pickups on, if I just do neck. Bridge. So yeah, that's how the amp sounds with the Gresh. Play same loop again with the Gresh. subwoofers definitely sound, you know, give it a more higher gain sound, more distortion, and it's higher output because it's humbucker, right? All right, so that's the Milkman One Watt Plus. I just want to demonstrate that. This guitar amp, obviously still very good guitar amp. Works well with pedals, but like I said, I just wanted to have something with a little bit more clean headroom. So this being a 10 watt amp, the Supro Keeley Custom 12 is a 25 watt amp. So I hope you guys can notice the difference in headroom when I play with this one. So yeah, let's talk about the Supro Keeley Custom 12. Okay, so this amp, I got it for $1,000. Well, I got it for $900 actually. It's kind of like a slightly used model. It's still pretty good condition. Brand new retails for $1,200 compared to the Milkman $2,000, right? So quite a bit cheaper than the Milkman. That's because Supro is this is like, I believe, actually this is made in the US too. Yeah, it's not that this isn't made in the US. This particular model is made in the US. Supro's other model is actually made in China. But I believe for this Keeley Custom 12 model, they actually do make it in the US, but just with Chinese components and stuff like that. Whereas Milkman obviously uses American components and stuff. So that's one reason. And plus Milkman is just one guy building it. Whereas Supro is just, it's a bigger company, you know, more people building these things. So let's go over what it has. So obviously the look is actually unique to Supro because this is kind of based on their vintage look. Supro, unlike Milkman, because it's like a boutique amplifier company, Supro goes all the way back, you know, to the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So their designs are actually based on their classic designs from the 50s and 60s. So yeah, this is, I can tell, this is I really do like the look of this Supro. It's got like nice blue, this is Tolex. Kind of nice Tolex actually on it. And like I said, this is a heavier amplifier for sure. It's a bigger, heavier amplifier than the Milkman. This is a 42-pound amplifier compared to the Milkman's 24 pounds. Actually, can't show you guys the controls exactly well here. So just like, I'll show you guys like this, okay? So obviously you have a guitar input. There's only one channel because it's meant to be a clean pedal platform. Then you have volume, treble, and bass, exact same as the Milkman, 2-band EQ. You want to keep that, I guess, Supro mid-range is what they want to keep, so no mid-adjustment. So this has an effects loop right on the top of the amplifier. Usually when guitar amps have effects loops, they're on the back. This is on the effects loops on the top with all the other controls because they want to make it easy for you to plug the pedals in. So effects loop, usually meant only for modulation type effects like reverb and delay. Work best in the effects loop. That's something that the Milkman and my Swart didn't have. So this is my first amp with an effects loop, and I'm going to make use of it. Hopefully the reverb and everything sounds better with it. Master volume, which I guess is sort of similar, but not exactly the same as the power attenuator on the Milkman. It doesn't actually adjust the wattage of the power output of the amp, but it does try to, like, you know, still adjust the overall volume of everything. So it works in a little bit of a similar way, but not the same as the power attenuator. And you have standby switch and the on switch. And as for the speaker, it is a Celestion G12M Creamback, which is, this is the same speaker, I believe, as the G12M Greenback speaker, which is a very famous guitar speaker used in Marshall Plexis and stuff back in the day. So like Jimi Hendrix, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton. These guys would have all used, oh, and Eddie Van Halen too. These guys would have all used G12M Greenbacks. The Greenback is just a higher, I guess, higher output handling version of the Greenback. So this is a 65 watt rated speaker compared to the 40 watt Jensen I have. So this can definitely handle more power. And yeah, it's a ceramic speaker too. The Jensen is an Alnico speaker, so I guess that's a little bit different as well. But yeah, this comes stock with a Celestion Creamback, which is a highly regarded speaker. And then you can see here there's a little plate here. It says Keeley Custom 12. Technically the model name is 1968 RK. Not exactly sure why it's 1968 though. That might be the model. I know that Supro made amplifiers until 1968. I'm not sure, maybe that has something to do with it. There's a main speaker out of 8 ohms right here. So this is your main speaker out. But then you have extensions out. So you have 2 extensions out for this one. You have a 4 ohm extension and another, you have a 4 ohm main and another 4 ohm extension here. which is interesting because they don't have an 8 ohm extension, they only have 4 ohm extensions. I don't know why. Usually guitar speakers like 4 ohms. I mean 8 ohms. Usually guitar speakers are 8 ohms, so I don't know why they only have 4 ohms here. So they have 4 ohm main and 4 ohm extension out. And yeah, design in collaboration with Robert Keeley here, and this is the little plug here for the cord. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Tubes wise, it's pretty similar to the Milkman. This uses a actually this uses a ECC 83 or something. That's similar to a 12AX7. I don't think they're actually the same, but the ECC 83 I think is similar to the 12AX7 preamp. Exact same power output tubes. It uses two 6v6s, groove tubes actually, which is just like a branded thing. But yeah, I think it's electro harmonics actually. But yeah, there's electro harmonics maybe 6v6s. And I believe this one is a solid state rectifier. I don't think it's a tube rectifier like the Milkman. I could be wrong, but I think it's a solid state rectifier. So that's another difference, I guess. So it won't sound as compressed or saggy as the Milkman does with its GC34 tube rectifier. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to plug the Supro in. Alright, and then for this one I'm going to actually plug the reverb into the effects loop, because technically you're supposed to use the reverb in the effects loop. So see, and it should sound a little bit more natural actually in the effects loop. And the special thing about the effects loop is that it inserts the effect like after the preamp distortion, which means that it's not affected by the preamp. So if you just put all your pedals in front of the amplifier without an effects loop, especially for modulation effects, the preamp distortion really kind of affects it, and I guess it affects the modulation stuff like reverb and delay in a weird way. So that's why they have an effects loop, is to put those effects after the preamp distortion so it sounds more natural. So it's not distorted by the preamp distortion, I guess. So that's why they have an effects loop. It's basically just for mostly modulation effects. You can put other effects in there, I guess, like compressor. I'm not sure where the looper goes actually, but yeah, I would say like it definitely is supposed to sound more natural with modulation effects, putting it after the preamp distortion. So that's why the effects loop exists. And I'm going to have the volume, treble, bass all set to about 6, just like with the Milkman, so you guys can see how much louder this is compared to the in the master. So you guys can see how much louder this is than the Milkman. All right. Takes a while to warm up. Okay, there we go. Okay, yeah, so with standby switch, turn that on. So I'm going to set all the volume controls to full, just like with the Milkman. You guys can hear how much louder the Keeley is. So yeah, it's definitely got a lot more headroom and it's a lot louder than the Milkman. So I'm actually going to dial down the master a little bit. Yeah, maybe to about 4. So the other thing I noticed is, besides the louder output volume, obviously, is that there's more low end. There's more low end compared to the Milkman. Yeah. Maybe it's a Celestion Creamback speaker. Maybe that's why. I'm thinking maybe it's a speaker. Yeah, compared to the Jensen Alnico speaker, the Celestion Creamback ceramic speaker might be another big difference here. It definitely sounds, yeah, it's got a lot more low end to it. Alright, so I'm going to turn on my, so this is, again, everything bypassed. So I have a neck middle. Then I turn on the Lightkeeper. Okay. So this pedal is something I'm going to always have to keep on with this amp, because it just adds back in more of the high end. I feel like if I don't have this, it's a little bit bit too much low end for me. It's kind of overpowering. So I need to add back in the high end, so that's why I'm going to always put on the Lightkeeper. Get back the high end. Yeah, without this, it just doesn't sound like a Strat. It doesn't exactly sound like a Strat. Put this back and it sounds very chimey like a Strat should. There we go. And then put on the reverb. Now this is, yeah, you guys have heard the reverb through the Milkman, right? So this is regular without reverb. Now I'm going to turn on the reverb, which is now going through the effects loop. Alright. Okay, so this reverb is a lot more noticeable than on the Milkman, right? When I had this reverb going through the front of the amp, like on the Milkman, it's a very subtle reverb effect, right, as you guys have heard. But going through the effects loop on the Supro Keeley, it's a lot more noticeable, actually. A lot more noticeable. Yeah, I mean, it's just, to me, this is a big difference. The reverb going through the front of the amp on the Milkman, it's so subtle I can barely hear it. But going through the effects loop now on Supro Keeley, yeah, it's way more deeper and, dare I say it, more natural sounding. More natural sounding. I mean, look, you just hear it, right? A lot more natural and noticeable on the Keeley here. Nice. So yeah, while the Milkman's One Watt Plus is clean, is good. Like I said, it's pretty good for pedals and stuff. The Keeley Custom 12, the Supro Keeley Custom 12, just the cleans are just. It's definitely got more headroom. It's got more output. And, yeah, to me the cleans do sound better on here. It's nothing against the Milkman. The cleans do sound better on the Supro. Just because it's got, yeah, a lot more clean headroom and a lot more output power, and this effects loop, which if I add the reverb in, is a big difference. Now, yeah, I would say the major disadvantages of the Supro, to me, it doesn't have the power attenuation. Would be nice to have that. And the weight, right? It's just the size and the weight is the Keeley is just bigger. It's just more. So it's a lot more of an effort to carry this thing. It's like over 40 pounds. But man, the cleans are really nice. So yeah, this is based more of on a Fender black face or silver face type of look and circuit compared to the Milkman, because yeah, the Milkman does sound more like a blonde amplifier, but then the Supro Keeley Custom 12, it sounds more like a Fender twin reverb, which is like a silver black face actually. So yeah, it sounds more like a Fender Deluxe or a Fender's twin reverb, like that. Obviously it doesn't have built-in reverb, but with this reverb on, it sounds closer to a Fender twin reverb or a Fender Deluxe compared to the Milkman, which sounds closer to a Fender blonde amplifier. Like this one sounds more like a Princeton or even like a Bassman type of sound. This one more like a Deluxe reverb, twin reverb. And then my Swark sounds more like a Champ. But yeah, I'm gonna turn on the Holy Grail now. You guys can hear the overdriven tone. All the settings are the same. sounds better on the Supro. Yeah, it sounds it's just more of it, right? I mean, just it seems like it opens up the pedals a lot more. I don't know. It's a subtle thing. Like for me, I think it just sounds, the pedals, the overdrive pedals sound a little bit more constrained when I put it through the Milkman. On Keeley, the Supro Keeley, it just has more room to do its thing, you know? Yeah. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but I feel like the pedals are getting the room to do the thing. But that's what this amp is for. It's really literally designed for pedals. So it better work well with them. So now I'm going to use the looper for the same loop. You can test it now. Oops. So better turn down the volume. Okay. Now, actually I forgot to test the mids. Let's test the mid booster. Because the Milkman's 10 watts, so this is 25 watts. So like basically putting on any kind of overdrive on the Milkman is already going to kind of distort it. Whereas on the Supro Keeley, it's pretty much on the edge of distortion. It requires a lot more to distort it. Which is why I can probably take more pedals without sounding muddy. Right? This one, if you put too many pedals in front of it, too many overdrive distortion pedals, it's going to get muddy kind of fast. It's just the headroom's not enough. This one, because it's so much headroom, I can keep putting more and more overdrive pedals on it before it starts to distort more. Alright, let's put on the loop now. Sounds louder, of course. to my Gresh quickly. What I like about both the Strat and the Gresh is that they're both very light guitars, so it's pretty easy for me just to pick them up and switch them in the middle of a gig or something. Just so light and just like use one hand and do it. Alright, this is the Gresh with the Filtertron humbuckers. Oh, okay. Again, with no effects turned on, it's just... I think if the Supro Keeley Custom was by itself, or you're just using it without any effects pedals, it doesn't sound very good actually. It sounds very kind of dark, too dark to me, especially with humbuckers. So if you're going to use humbuckers and you go straight into the Keeley without any effects, it just sounds very muddy and dark, like this. I mean, if I go to the neck, it's going to sound really dark. See how dark it sounds? Way too dark. So what I have to do is I have to turn on the Lightkeeper to get those highs back. Now that's actually tolerable. Yeah, basically I have to put on some kind of boost in order to get my highs back. Yeah, if I don't have this on, it's too dark. I have to have this on. That's better, yeah. Otherwise I just don't have enough highs. I lose like so much of my highs if I don't have that. Turn on the reverb. That's better. Alright, and with the overdrive on. Sounds pretty good actually. Yeah, I think the overdrive sounds I mean just that it's the this amp can handle it a bit better than the Milkman. Right, play the loop. love the clean sound out of this amp. So anyways guys, that's it. That's the Supro Keeley Custom 12. I can get some really beautiful clean tones out of this amp. And no offense to like nothing against the Milkman One Watt Plus. This also has some good clean tones out of it, and pretty decent for pedals as well. It's just that I wanted, you know, even more headroom and even more cleans. The thing is, this one, because it's 10 watts, still doesn't have quite enough headroom for me. So when I put a bunch of drive pedals in front of it, it just kind of yeah, it distorts very easily after that. There just isn't enough headroom to handle those kind of pedals. Not that many anyways. I'm a kind of guy who uses like 3 overdrive pedals or more. So I put them all in front of this amp and it just can't handle it. So yeah, that's why I got the Supro Keeley Custom 12, and it works beautifully. I can put all these pedals in front of it. I have an effects loop, which sounds a lot better actually with the effects loop, with the reverb and stuff and delay. But then when I have all those overdrive pedals in front of it, it just takes them all, and you know, it doesn't sound, yeah, it doesn't get like distorted or anything as easily as the Milkman does. It just handles them all really well, because it has a lot more headroom on it, a lot more clean headroom. So that's what it's designed for. I would say the downside of this amp, beside it being kind of heavy, is that if you don't use any pedals with it, it's not that great sounding. Like just as a straight plug-in amp, the Milkman sounds better. Like I'm just gonna say that. If you're just gonna plug your guitar into an amp, there are a lot more better choices than the Supro Keeley 12. Because if I just plug in either my like Strat or Gresh or whatever into the Keeley, it just sounds like kind of muddy and dark. So I have to use pedals to shape it. If I don't use pedals to shape it, it's not going to sound as good. So that's the caveat of this amp, I would feel. It's the downside. Is that used standalone, it doesn't sound that great. A lot more better amps, right? That's where, like, you know, a whole bunch of other Fenders or Milkmans, right? Basically a lot of other amps would just sound better than this if you're just going to plug your guitar straight into it. So don't get this if you're just going to plug your guitar straight into it. This is really, you have to put effects pedals on it. If you don't, it just doesn't sound very good. But when you do have effects pedals on it, then it's great. It's a great clean pedal platform amp, and pretty much I always have my pedals on. So I'm never going to use this without a pedal, so that's fine for me. But yeah, I think that's the only thing about this amp that I feel is kind of a negative, is that you can't really use, like, the sound and tone out of this amp isn't that good if you're just going to use it straight in. But yeah, it's great when you use pedals. You can, I think it's designed to be like, yeah, it's really designed to be used with pedals. So you have to use it with pedals, else it isn't going to sound very good. So yeah, like some kind of preamp, like if I wasn't using Lightkeeper, I would use something like a Dunlop EP101, or maybe like a Greer Special Request, or even the Catalinbrad Epoch Boost that I have as well. You just use some kind of like, or the Exotic EP Booster is another one. Use some kind of like preamp booster pedal to get your highs back, because this amp is just a little bit too muddy, too many like too much low end for me if I just plug it straight in. Doesn't sound very good. So I think you need to have at least some kind of preamp booster pedal in order to make it sound decent. And then put all your pedals, you know, after that, and it sounds great. So yeah, it's the only caveat with this amp. So again, Milkman One Watt Plus, you know, has been in service with me for like 6-7 years now. Yeah, going on 7 years, because it's 2017, which is kind of crazy. It's 2024. So anyways, this has been, yeah, I've had this for about 7 years. It's been a stalwart, a workhorse for me. I've used it on so many different guitar videos, but now it's time for me to move up to something even more. Just as, yeah, it just has more headroom, better cleans for me, and better to use with my pedals. So Supro says that this amp is a Class A amp, even though it's 2 output tubes. But maybe they have a special transformer to do that, because I know the Milkman amp does that. It has 2 6v6 output tubes as well, but because they have a special transformer, they're actually being run in parallel, so it's kind of like a Class A amp, I guess. And I guess maybe the Supro Keeley's doing the same thing. So I just want to make it clear that this actually has 2 preamp tubes, 2 ECC83. I believe the Milkman only has 1 preamp tube, only one 12AX7 here. This has 2 ECC83s and 2 6v6s, just like the Milkman, and perhaps a special custom transformer that allows them to be run in parallel as well. So I guess both Class A amps. The only difference is maybe the rectifier, although I can't really find any information about the rectifier from Supro. I assume it's maybe a solid state amplifier, but that might be the only area where it's different. The Milkman I know has a GC34 rectifier tube here. So yeah, I think that would be the major. Yeah, it has 12AX7 and yeah, 26V6 GT. Oh, this is the one that has groove tubes. This has two 6V6 groove tubes. This has two 6V6 from Electro Harmonics. And yeah, one GC34 rectifier here. So I'm guessing the rectifier might be the only difference between these two in terms of the tube configuration. And this one has one more preamp tube. So I guess that's a major difference. Okay, so another thing, like I mentioned before, difference between the Milkman and the Supro Keeley is that the Supro Keeley has a master volume and the Milkman has an attenuator. Now, I didn't quite know the differences between these two, so I basically looked it up, and I think this is how it's like. So a master volume amp, you'll see amps without master volume too, but the difference is that master volume amps can control the level of signal going to the power amp section. So on something like the Supro Keeley, right, you'll see a normal volume. This is for the channel, I guess, volume. And then you'll have a master volume, which is for the total amount of signal going to the power amp. So if I turn up the normal volume control going into the preamp, then this can cause the preamp to distort. And I can also use the master volume to control the signal going into the power amp. This means that basically you can have a lot of preamp distortion but control the amount of total distortion going into the power amp, meaning you can get a reasonable number, like a reasonable amount of distortion without having to dime the amp, which is what normally you would have to do without a master volume control. So a normal amp, like really old school amps, they don't have master volume control, like amps from the 50s and 60s. I don't think master control was actually on any amps until the 80s, but yeah. If you go to like an older amp, those don't have master volume. Basically, if you want to get distorted, overdriven tones, you have to turn up the volume and just dime the amp basically. And the problem with that is that you need to have a lot of volume in order to do that. So you had to make the amp get really loud, which is not like in a bedroom situation or in like a small apartment situation, which I'm living in. That's just not possible, right? It has to basically get really loud in order to get the overdriven tone. But in a master volume amp, you can get that preamp type of distortion, but at a lower volume because you can kind of control the amount of signal that's sent into the power amp section. Whereas an attenuator is actually technically better than a master volume because an attenuator is basically can control the amount of output after it hits the power amp. So the attenuator is the way that they always talk about it is you can control the amount of wattage actually that the amp can output. So basically, if you have an attenuator, like on the Milkman, it's controlling essentially the output volume after it hits the preamp and the power amp. So that means you can get power amp distortion and also control the amount of output volume there. So that's even better because most people like power amp distortion, maybe more than preamp distortion. So on a master volume amp, you can dime the preamp distortion, but you still have to reduce the power amp distortion, right? So you're not going to totally get that same overdriven tone that players back in the like arena rock players, right? Like those big rock bands, Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, they play with really loud volumes. You can't really get that with a master volume amp unless you dime it. But with an attenuator, you technically can, just at a lower volume, because it affects the tone after, it affects the signal after it goes through the power amp. So you can get that power amp distortion and you can control the the total amount of volume that comes out after. So I would say technically an attenuator is better to have because it comes after the power amp section. So you can get your preamp distortion and your power amp distortion, and you can get very high levels of both but at a lower volume. So you can get your natural overdriven tone. Whereas with a master volume amp, you can only get the preamp distortion at a natural level, and then you still can't get the power amp distortion at a high volume if you use the master control. So I hope that, I think I kind of get it now, but yeah, I was looking like what's the difference master volume and attenuator. Master volume is you can control the amount of signal fed into the power amp. Attenuator is the amount of signal, the output level after the power amp essentially, which is better because you can control the total amount of distortion from the preamp and power amp rather than just the preamp. So yeah, with a master volume amp, you technically cannot get the same tone that you can just by diming a normal amp without master volume, because you are controlling the signal sent to the power amp. So if you're, if you want a lower volume, then it's actually not the same kind of tone. But with Intentuator, you technically can get the same tone that you can with just by diming an amp, because like it basically is the entire signal, just you're reducing the wattage, right? So you're just reducing the total output, but technically the signal that goes through is the same. Whereas with the master volume, it's not really the same signal if you're turning down the master volume. So I kind of understand it now. I know it's a little bit confusing, differences between master volume and Intentuator, but I think I got it now. So I hope you guys learned a little bit from that. Okay, another thing you might be wondering is why is the Milkman so expensive? So the reason is because it's one guy that's hand building them in San Francisco. Obviously the cost of living in San Francisco is one factor, but because it's a boutique amp, that means that he hand builds them all himself, one at a time. He uses premium components. He always talks about using the high quality Jupiter capacitors, Jupiter speakers, and Mercury magnetics transformers. Those are all made in the USA components. And yeah, it's built to a very high standard, and this is really what boutique amps are about. They're made in the US, so labor cost is high, and they're using top shelf made in the USA components wherever possible. Why is the Supro cheaper? Supro, actually, the Keeley model is made in the US, but it's assembled in the US using imported components. So actually the Keeley is using off-the-shore parts, so it's not necessarily using made in USA parts. That's one reason why it's cheaper. Another reason why it's cheaper is because it's not hand wired. The Milkman is hand wired on everything on here is actually using hand wiring on turret boards. So this is a more expensive way of doing it. It's easier to repair, but it's a more expensive way of doing it. Whereas the Keeley uses PCBs, and PCBs are cheaper, but they're also harder to repair. So that's part of the reason why the Supro Keeley is cheaper. And also, of course, it's by a bigger company, it's more mass produced, and they benefit from the economies of scale that a smaller company like Milkman does not. So that's really the reason why the Milkman is more expensive, has less power, but you're paying basically for made in USA labor. You're paying for like a small shop supporting the USA made labor, and the higher quality made in US components is basically what you're paying for. So really it's up to you to decide. I have a bunch of boutique amplifiers. I played most of my career, I guess, in guitars. The Swart Atomic Junior is also a boutique amp made by a guy in North Carolina. And then after the Swart Atomic Junior, I played this Milkman for a long time. It's made in San Francisco. Most of my, I would say, tube amps I played are boutique amps, and that's because I wanted to support the small builders. But I thought it's time for me, going with the lower cost amp, just because it's if I wanted to get a boutique amp like the Supro Keeley, it would just cost me a lot more. Of course, there are a lot of clean pedal platform type of boutique amps. Like even Milkman is a pretty good pedal platform amp if I get the higher wattage versions, like the half pint. So I could do that, or I can get like a Victoria. Those are pretty expensive amplifiers too. They're based on tweed fenders, I guess. So those can have some clean headroom. I think the Tone King, I think, is another brand that has really nice clean tones. If I stick to the Fender style, I guess, amps, I think those are the ones that come to mind. But there's a whole bunch of boutique amp manufacturers. Also, the ones that are based on Dumble amplifiers, like Fuchs, right? That's another one I'm looking at. And then Amplify Nation, which makes Dumble clones and stuff. So those kind of amp manufacturers, I'm sure they have really good, and Two Rock, right? That's another one. They have really good clean tones as well, high headroom, but they're all really expensive. So I'd be paying many more times than I paid for the Supro Keeley. So that's why I just stuck with the Supro Keeley, because it's exactly what I wanted. Even though it's not the boutique, not supporting the one made in US manufacturer, but Supro is a historic American company anyways, and yeah, still it's made in US anyways. So I think that's why I went for the Supro Keeley as opposed to another boutique amp manufacturer like Milkman. So the special thing about the effects loop is that it inserts the effect in between the preamp and the power amp. So basically when you run all your pedals in through the front of the amp like you have to do on the Milkman, some effects like reverb and delay, especially modulation effects, might sound very weird because they go through the preamp distortion. So that's why the effects loop exists, mainly for, I would say, modulation effects. But I guess you can also put like a compressor in there as well. I'm not sure about loopers. But when you insert it into the effects loop, it goes in after the preamp distortion and can sound more natural that way because it's not affected by the preamp distortion. So yeah, that's part of the reason why I got the Supro as well, is because this comes with a built-in effects loop, which is very easy to access. It's something I didn't have on the Milkman. So hopefully my reverb and delay effects can sound more natural through the effects loop. So another thing I have to mention about Mr. Robert Keeley is that he was well, actually one of my favorite pedal makers as well. I've used several of his pedals before in the past. I think I used his Magnetic Echo, which is a great sounding digital delay. I used his Oxblood Germanium, which is a tweaked version of the Klon Centaur. And I've used his Omni Reverb, which actually has been on my pedal board for a long time before I replaced it with the Fender Marine Layer. So yeah, that was a pretty good reverb. In general, I'm a huge fan of his guitar pedals, and he's being one of the pioneers of the boutique pedal industry. He created pretty much almost the industry standard compressor pedal, which is used by a lot of different guitars, the Keeley compressor. I'm using the exotic compressor, but that's based on the Ross compressor, the exact same compressor the Keeley compressor is based on. John Mayer used a lot of his effects. One of my guitar heroes, like the Keeley Katana. He modded a lot of the effects pedals, like the blues drivers and the tube screamers and stuff like that, just like Analog Man did, I guess, as well. A lot of these boutique builders start off by modifying pedals and stuff. But yeah, just want to talk a little bit about Mr. Robert Keeley. He definitely makes a lot of great guitar pedals. Currently, though, I don't really own any of his effects. I've owned them before in the past, but yeah, just right now I don't really have any. Definitely had them before. I think he's definitely one of my favorite pedal makers, though, along with Brian Wampler from Wampler Pedals. Makes a lot of my favorite overdrives. And yeah, like in general, like I've liked pedals from all different kinds of companies, but Keeley and Wampler are like two I would generally go to the most. That's it, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions, but that's a comparison. The Milkman One Watt Plus, still a great amp. Just wasn't doing it for me in terms of handling more and more pedals, because I think at the time I got this I didn't have as many pedals as I do now. I think I only had like maybe 6 pedals at the time I got this, but now I have like 10, 12 pedals, right? So now I need to move up to an even bigger amp that can handle this many pedals. So yeah, that's it, guys. Let me know if you have any questions and comments, and yeah, as always, thanks for watching.